세계의 평화와 상생을 위한 DMZ, 노글리 사건, 베를린 장벽의 기억과 기록화 국제 학술회의를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 학술회의는 독일과 한국에서 온라인으로 동시에 진행되고 있습니다. 원활한 진행을 위해서 발표를 맡으신 선생님과 토론을 맡으신 선생님들께서는 발표와 토론 시간을 엄수해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 그럼 먼저 개회사를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 한국외국어대학교 정보기록학 연구소장이자 한국기록과 문화학회회장이신 노명환 교수님의 개회사를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we open our international conference on memories and documentation about DMZ, Nogunri incident, war, peace, and coexistence of the world. We thank deeply all the participants, as all kinds of speakers, listeners, discussants. Today, we want to make this conference from the various perspectives of the intercultural communication. We are here today with the various cultural backgrounds. With culture, we mean various ways of thinking, speaking, listening, discussing and living. We touch abundantly various fields of research, education, civil movements, and international cultures. We pursue for intercultural communication, exchanges, cooperation, and convergence. From now on, we will keep holding a series of the conference in this spirit. With the beginning of the Cold War, Korea and Germany were divided. The historical backgrounds of the two divisions were very different. Meanwhile, Germany became unified, but Korea remains divided. However, the Berlin Wall and the Korean DMZ are getting more attention and interest from the world citizens. They are becoming the symbols for the world in various aspects. They provide the people of the world with very abundant and dynamic meanings. Simply, they were symbols for the tragedy of the national division, the separated families, the war and fear, the memories of pain, and the lifelong trauma. Among them, the Nogunri massacre was a special type of tragedy and lifelong trauma, as we hear today from Dr. Jung Woo-do. However, we the people have been working from these tragedies for creating the precious values for the present and the future, as like reconciliation, peace, coexistence, and common prosperity. We can see such models in the personal figures like today's interviewees, Dr. Shin Dong-sam, and in the activities of Berlin Wall Foundation, Nogunri International Peace Foundation, and all the activists around the DMZ, as like Korea DMZ Peace and
정구도 노근리 국제평화재단 이사장님의 개회사를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 됩니다.
오늘 저희 노근리 국제평화재단과 한국외국어대학 정보기록학연구소 등 4개 기관과 공동으로 국제학술회의를 개최하게 됨을 뜻깊게 생각합니다. 오늘의 행사를 준비해 주신 외국어대 노명환 교수님과 연구진들, 국내외에서 참여해 주신 단체와 학자와 연구원분들의 노고에 진심으로 감사를 드립니다. 독일과 한국은 냉전 시대의 분단의 비극을 경험한 공통점이 있는 나라입니다. 한반도를 남북으로 나누고 있는 DMZ의 시원인 군사분계선 38도선이 얄타 회담에서 결정되었습니다. 1945년 2월 소련의 크림반도 얄타에서 열렸던 얄타 회담에서는 미국의 루스벨트 대통령, 영국의 윈스턴 처칠 총리, 소련의 요시프 스탈린 최고인민위원이 모여서 나치 독일을 미국, 영국, 프랑스, 소련이 분할 점령한다는 원칙을 재확인했습니다. 오늘 세계 평화와 상생을 위한 노구니 사건, DMZ, 베를린 장벽의 기억과 기록하라는 주제로 열리는 이번 국제학술회의는 참으로 중요한 시작이라고 생각합니다. 독일은 동서독 분단을 극복하고 이미 통일의 위협을 이루었지만 우리 한국은 아직도 남북 분단의 상태가 75년이 넘도록 계속되고 있기 때문입니다. 오늘 학술대회에는 미국, 독일, 인도, 한국 등 4개국가 30여 명의 저명한 학자와 연구자들이 참여하여 분단 극복 방안, 화해와 상생을 위한 다양한 방안들을 서로 공유하고 배우는 의미 있는 시간이 될 것으로 기대가 됩니다. 오늘을 시작으로 공동 국제학술대회가 거듭될수록 세계 평화가 확산되고 상생과 화해의 지평선이 넓어지며 서로 간에 공고한 연대가 있기를 소망합니다. 감사합니다.
네. 그럼 마지막으로 베를린 장벽 재단 이사장이신 악셀 클라우스마이어님의 개회사를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Well, thank you, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, near and far, and all so close together as we are now through this miracle of technology. A very warm welcome on behalf of the Berlin Wall Foundation. We are delighted to be part of this conference that has so diligently and thoroughly been planned by Professor No and his great team and partners. Therefore, it is my utmost pleasure to first thank you all so much for all what you've done to make this happen and to bring us all together. To develop the concept of this conference so thoughtfully and which will combine and unite topics from Korea's past, present and future, and the same aspects will be dealt with a number of German perspectives and many more. We are delighted to be among this distinguished group of scholars with various different backgrounds from several countries, and yet one common topic: the dealing with the past and its often difficult heritage, the coming to terms with the remnants and traces of a painful past and often present, or of divided or formerly divided countries, and thus, in the end, the values of freedom. I'm utterly grateful to Professor No and Wolfram Hottenstedt. The latter brought us together, that we signed a contract for sustainable cooperation last year, which will be the basis of our future collaboration. And what is this all about? Exchanging knowledge, bringing people together, and learning from one another in an international context. This conference is certainly, I'm sure, the beginning of a wonderful friendship. And well, it sounds like Hollywood to me, but in our case, it's hopefully true. This conference takes place in an important year for us Germans. Germany was lucky enough to be able to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the fall of the wall in 2019 and the 30th anniversary of reunification last year. How very telling that both our countries, Korea and Germany, share the same date to have their national holiday. And we share this date with very mixed emotions and perspectives. Germans are often looking back on how the communist dictatorship was peacefully overcome in East Germany and what this means for our united Germany today. As we know today, the sudden unification could not solve all problems, heal all wounds, and new challenges that arose from these extremely speedy and often unexpected developments more than 30 years ago. Korea, however, and we have heard that already from Professor No, is still preparing as thoroughly as possible for a better, hopefully reunited and peaceful future. And we at the Berlin Wall Memorial receive many official groups from South Korea to exchange knowledge and experiences. We have a very close working relationship with both the German-Korean Forum and the Korean Embassy in Berlin, which sends us VIP visitors and many groups from South Korea on a very regular basis. And look, I've got this most wonderful and useful gift here from the former Korean ambassador, Dr. Bum Go-yong, who how very fitting and a token of our sort of permanent and everlasting friendship. I take it as a good sign that we are meeting at the beginning of the year when Germany will also commemorate the 60th anniversary of the events that led to the building of the wall in August 1961. We will look back to these painful events when a city was cut in two halves for more than 28 years, and not only the city, but the entire country. And we will focus on involving contemporary witnesses and their biographies. They are often painful stories and how they made it through these difficult times. They will make us think and reflect and encourage us to work even harder in finding appropriate measures to reach current target groups, young people especially, because we believe that it is in the hands of our and the next generation to handle our fragile democracies with utmost care. I strongly believe in the power of international knowledge exchange and transfer, and consider it to be utterly important to bring international scholars together, just as we are doing today, to learn from one another and to get to know different approaches to deal with and to come to terms with our respective difficult pasts. And to be honest, I'm so curious to hear your talks and thus will be silent from now on. But before I am doing this, I have again I want to again express my deepest gratitude to all of you who share this morning together or this next hours together. And once again, a big thank you to everyone involved, all the organizers and institutions that support us today. And finally, a very big thank you to the interpreters because you are doing a very great job. Thank you so much.
네, 그러면 이어서 이번 국제학술회의를 축하해 주시는 분들의 축사를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 한국외국어대학교 김인철 총장님의 축하 인사를 영상으로 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 한국외고대학교 총장 김인철입니다. 우리 한국외대 정보기록학연구소, 노글리 국제평화재단, 베를린 장벽재단이 공동으로 주최하는 국제학술대회에 참여하신 여러분들을 환영합니다. 세계 언어와 지역학에 대한 연구와 교육을 중심으로 하는 우리 한국외고대학교에서 평화와 상생을 위한 주제로 학술대회가 열리는 것은 참 뜻깊고 환영해야 할 일입니다. 한국외대의 창학이념은 진리, 평화, 창조입니다. 우리 대학에서는 진리를 추구하고 평화를 만들어가며 창의적인 사유와 활동으로 인간 개인의 삶과 사회를 풍부하게 만들어가는 연구와 교육 활동이 매우 활발히 진행되고 있습니다. 또 그러한 인재를 배출해내고 있습니다. 한국은 세계적인 냉전과 국가의 분단으로 많은 고통을 겪어온 나라입니다. 그러한 고통 중에서도 진리, 평화, 창조를 위한 노력을 열정적으로 쏟아왔고 많은 것을 이루어내어 세계적으로도 모범 국가로 발전하여 왔습니다. 전쟁과 굶주림의 고통을 평화와 풍요로움으로 만들어 왔습니다. 앞으로도 이러한 발전의 방향을 가속화해 나갈 것입니다. 그 고통의 과거를 직시하고 평화와 풍요로움의 오늘과 내일을 만들어 갈 것입니다. 이번 학술대회를 통해 이러한 취지의 연구와 토론이 뜨겁게 이루어질 것을 기대합니다. 참여하신 모든 패널 그리고 일반 참여자들께 응원의 박수를 보내드립니다. 여러분 감사합니다.
네, 다음으로 한국 DMZ 평화생명동산의 정성헌 이사장님의 축하 인사 말씀을 듣도록 하겠습니다.
안녕하십니까. 감사합니다. 평화의 인사를 다시 한번 드립니다. 저는 한국 DMZ 평화생명동산 이사장입니다. 그리고 저는 평화의 아버지입니다. 저 아들 이름이 평화입니다. 그래서 평화의 아버지라고 그러죠. 모든 그 슬픔과 고통의 원인은 갈라짐이라고 생각합니다. 내 자신이 내부에서 갈라지고 자아가 분열되는 거죠. 사람과 사람이 갈라지고 사람과 자연이 갈라지고 그래서 모든 고통과 슬픔과 어려움이 계속되고 이 어려움과 고통과 슬픔은 점점 더 커지고 심화되고 있습니다. 오늘 우리의 주제인 평화와 상생은 어떻게 보면 갈라짐을 넘어서 하나됨으로 갈 거냐. 내 자신을 온전한 나로 하나를 이루고 사람과 사람이 하나 되도록 사회적 합의를 이루고 사람과 자연이 하나 되도록 하는 그런 노력이 합쳐질 때 평화와 상생은 그때 비로소 굳건하게 뿌리를 내릴 겁니다. 평화생명동산이 생각하는 통일, 독일은 저희들보다 벌써 훨씬 먼저 통일을 이루었습니다만 저희들은 아직도 통일을 못 이루고 있는데 그 통일은 좀 더 값진 통일이 되기 위한 진통을 갖는 통일이라서 아직 안 되는 것 같습니다. 제가 생각하는 통일은 남한과 북한이 통일됨과 동시에 지금 신음하고 있는 하늘과 땅과 사람이 통일되는 것은 합친 통일이라고 생각합니다. 그 진정한 통일을 위해서 저희들은 작은 힘이나마 노력을 할 것이고 노근리 형제자매들과 베를린 형제자매들과 예고대 형제자매들과 뜻을 합쳐서 평화 상생의 길로 가겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 그럼 이어서 박정 국회의원님의 축사를 영상으로 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
학술회의에 참석해 주신 여러분 반갑습니다. 역사적인 남북정상회담과 남북미 정상회동이 열린 판문점을 지역구로 두고 있는 경기도 파주시의 국회의원 박정희입니다. 먼저 세계의 평화와 상생을 위한 DMZ, 노근리 사건, 베를린 장벽의 기억과 기록화 학술회의 개최를 진심으로 축하드립니다. 어려운 여건 속에서도 뜻깊은 자리를 만들어주신 한국외대 정보기록학연구소 노명환 연구소장님, 노근리 국제평화재단 정구도 이사장님, 베를린 장벽재단 악셀 크라우스마이어 이사장님과 만프레드 비시만 아카이브 소장님께 감사드립니다. 아울러 발표와 토론, 인터뷰 등을 통해 함께해 주신 패널 여러분과 세계 평화를 염원하는 모든 참가자 여러분께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 우리 모두에게는 전쟁으로 인한 아픈 상처가 있습니다. 한반도의 남과 북을 가르고 있는 DMZ, 수백 명의 민간인이 희생되었던 충북 영동의 노근리, 그리고 한반도 곳곳에는 참혹했던 전쟁의 흔적이 있고 우리 기억 속에도 선명하게 남아 있습니다. 오늘 열린 학술회의처럼 전쟁에서 비롯된 공간에 대한 인식과 기억들을 극복하기 위한 노력들이 최근 이어지고 있습니다. 역사적 사건을 문화적 기억으로 전환하고 치유와 극복, 화해와 승화, 공정과 번영의 가치를 함께 담기 위한 논의가 활발하게 진행 중에 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 오늘 우리가 베를린 장벽의 사례를 통해 교훈을 얻고 앞으로 나아가야 할 방향에 대해 논의하는 시간은 매우 의미가 있을 것입니다. 저 역시 여러분 노력이 힘을 받을 수 있도록 늘 함께하겠다는 말씀을 드립니다. 아무쪼록 다시 한번 학술회의 개최를 진심으로 축하드립니다. 여러분 모두 건강하시고 대내 평안하시길 기원하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
마지막으로 독일 페이타 대학교 사회과학대학의 페터 니츠케 학장님의 축사를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody, and of course, good afternoon to South Korea. This is not a video, this is a speech in real time. So I like to thank Professor Myung-Han No for this very fantastic topic he is dealing with us today. This is, after all, we have done some remarkable projects during the last 20 years in cooperation between our two universities, and I think this again is a very good paradigm for the construction of a more peaceful time, maybe in future. So to compare the experience between two countries, Germany here and Korea there, with the history of both divided nations, Germany today together, but Korea still divided on this time, may be a good learning effect for us all to go to a peaceful existence in the future. But this is, after all, also a special topic for international meaning in understanding the communication to overcome the frontiers of hate, the categories in thinking of enemies and so on, especially in the international constellation. In this way, I think I'm really expand to what's the topics we have discussed and we are dealing with the next 2 hours on. And so I'm very glad to enjoy the discussions we have seen now during the next minutes. So I think we will all have a good time in this conference. Good luck.
네, 그러면 이어서 바로 1부 첫 번째 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 악셀 클라우스마이어 베를린 장벽재단 이사장님의 기념과 기억의 장소, 기념과 기억을 위한 장소, 베를린 장벽재단이라는 제목의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to share with you the my presentation. I'm share the screen now. I hope you can see it. Does it work? Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. So we'll be talking about aims, sites, and our educational program at the Berlin Wall Foundation, which is a stately, so I'll check the time just a second. Right, I'll have the time here, so I should be fine. We are a stately funded institution that grew out of civic commitment, and we are getting an annual public funding of approximately 4.5 million euros annually. And we employ 55, more or less 55 people on our sort of, at 4 sites that we are running at the moment. And we receive, if there is not Corona, we are receiving approximately 5.5 million visitors. I will try to make you familiar with the site and with our sort of common aim. And so therefore, I would like to first give you our sort of first task, our first aim and main, most important thing we have to do in our law. And here it is, we are in Berlin, and the federal government. So we are, and we are and provide information about the history of the wall and the German migration from the German Democratic Republic in the East as part of and contributory factor of the German division and the East-West conflict. It also aims to preserve historical sites, and I will show you, take you through the sites in a minute, and authentic remains to provide a dignified commemoration of the victims of communist dictatorship and tyranny. So what you see here in my first slide is an aerial view of the Berlin Wall Memorial in the center of Berlin. So you can see here in the back is the television tower, and you can see the only remaining of the wall where we have the full width of the former death strip. And we haven't, so here where my name is and so forth, this is former west, this is former east. You have the watchtower here, you have the patrol road in the middle, and we have now an exhibition alongside this very street that was the dividing line between east and west. So here some more images. We have a documentation center there where we have a permanent exhibition of which you will see a few slides. We have the former death strip. We have on site the so-called Chapel of Reconciliation, and this has to be kept in mind. This whole site is the result of civic commitment. We can say that all major sites in Berlin where we still see remnants and fragments of the wall, where there is still sort of fabric there, it's due to civic commitment. It was not a political decision from, so to speak, top to bottom, but it was bottom up. There were people like here, in this case, the local vicar, Pastor Fischer, who literally stood in 1990 in front of the bulldozers when the bulldozers came to take down the wall. He said and stood in front of these machines and machinery and said, well, people, stop it here. We will need this historic fabric in the future to tell and explain to future generations that this ugly and deadly thing really existed. So civic commitment in this case here. Our second site is in the former south of West Berlin. And this is, so I'm trying to get this away. Anyway, sorry, I'm too fast. Is in the former south of West Berlin, where we have a former refugee camp where approximately 1.3 million people, refugees from communist Germany in West Berlin, got their, so to speak, West German identity. They had to go through certain procedures, got their West Berlin papers, and this was taking place here in the Marienfelde refugee camp. So we run this site, we have an exhibition there on the history of mass escape, of fleeing East Germany, fleeing the communist regime. We have been made responsible for the longest remaining strip of the wall in the sort of very center of Berlin. This is the so-called East Side Gallery. We kind of inherited it from one of the districts in Berlin about 2.5 years ago. And this site is visited by approximately incredible 4 million visitors a year. And what is it all about? It is in 1990, approximately 118 artists from all over the world gathered there and painted their visions, their images of freedom and the joy of the peaceful overcoming of the wall on the former Berlin Wall. And you can see here on the far right an image called The Kiss, with the East German leader Erich Honecker and Brezhnev, the former Soviet leader, as one of the icons on this wall. And this wall is approximately 1.4 kilometers long. And we are looking after this site now, and we are currently developing an exhibition there, because the most surprising thing about it all is that this site, I mean, so many people go there and gather there, and there hasn't so far and to the present day not really been any sort of touristic infrastructure, which is even more surprising. So we were asked to develop an exhibition to explain the site to these enormous amounts of visitors from everywhere. So the next one is the so-called Günther Litvin Memorial, which is also in our hands. So we have, this is a former watchtower in the middle of the city, dedicated to the first person shot at the wall. Günther Litvin on the far right here on the upright. A young tailor who was trying to escape from east to west on August 24th, 1961, so just 10 days after the wall went up. And we have this, again, civic commitment. The younger brother of this man actually took this kind of confiscated this watchtower, sat there, repaired it, and made it a little documentation center dedicated to his brother. So, and this is, we got this watchtower in 2017 and have been looking after it ever since. Furthermore, a short look into the future. This is the former checkpoint Charlie, one of the most famous checkpoints on the planet. This is an aerial view of checkpoint Charlie with all these sort of checkpoint and customs and whatever installations there. It is long gone and has almost completely disappeared, and almost no physical remains are on the site. And the Berlin Senate asked our institution to develop a museum of the Cold War at the former checkpoint. Negotiations and procedures are extremely slow. We are invited and to develop a museum that is not only dealing with Berlin, but that should span the Cold War, the worldwide Cold War conflict. But at the moment, it is and has been for years very, very slow process due to the site and the development of the site. It's in the, as you can see, in the very center of Berlin, and but it's all due to selling and buying the land, owning the land. So we are working, of course, on a concept for this museum, and yet we are in the hands of investors, in a shortage of money, but things will happen sooner or later. So I will keep you posted, so to speak. And the last site that we will have or get in about 3 or 4 months is yet another example of civic commitment. Here, this elderly gentleman, now more than 90 years old, is the Berlin-based artist Ben Waging, who in 1990, again, he simply took this land very close to the current Reichstag, and this site is the last remaining bit in the governmental area, this last bit of the wall, and Ben Waging worked with this and dedicated it to called it the Parliament of Trees Against War and Violence. Hardly known, this site, but a very interesting bit, an artistic approach and dealing with these remnants. So a short look what we are doing. What is our institution doing at all these sites? We, in the first place, commemorate the victims. We had a major research project. We commemorate the victims. This is these are images on the left-hand side from August the 13th, when we commemorate especially the victims, and the picture on the right is from November 9th, the day when the wall came down, and we commemorated with candles, because candles were a very strong symbol of the peaceful revolution in 1989. Here, another site where we commemorate the victims individually. We established a site there somewhere in the former death strip where people can go and lay down flowers, for example. We have an exhibition in one of our buildings. This is a permanent exhibition on the history of the wall. Also, we are involving, of course, contemporary witnesses, but also we span the whole thing and put it into a wider context, into an international context, and explain why the wall was built and how it came down. We have the archives, and I hope my colleague, who is yet to come to join us, will be talking about the archives. So we have all sorts of materials we are working with. And his motto, he will explain later on, we collect to interpret and mediate history. We have a vast number of not only images, but also written sources and of course, all sorts of materials. Here's some files, and we have a very strong database and all sorts of elements he will be talking about later. We publish in various ways, very traditionally with books, but also social media, press releases. We help supporting documentaries, films, and whatever is dealing with the history. We do political education in various seminars, workshops for very different target groups. I mean, as all you will do, and we are focusing on young people, as you can see here, in various formats. We involve contemporary witnesses. We do interviews, talks, we have oral history gatherings, we have presentations, we sometimes have young people interviewing older people, contemporary witnesses, to simply learn from them, to hear their stories, to give them a forum for talking and exchanging different experiences. The same with on an academic level. Of course, we hold conferences just as this one. We have public talks, and we do also various digital offers like chatbots, augmented reality. But here, the picture shows a very sort of traditional academic podium with members from the former Allied states and the former Russia. So one historian stands for each country: an American, a French, a Russian, and a British historian gathered at the Berlin Wall, so to speak, looking back on historic events. So this is my last image, and I think I'm rather well on time. Our main topics are remembrance, commemoration, interpretation, and we want to make history relevant. We want to involve people and want to make history interesting for as many people as possible. We are building bridges between the past and the present, from the present to the past. We want to share our key values, that democracy and freedom are not self-evident and both fragile, and that also the great value of constitutional legality cannot be taken for granted. And the Berlin Wall, of course, is the best example how fragile the sort of democracy is, that there was a regime that simply thought to wall in a complete nation, to block them off from democracy. So these are our key aims, that to actually democracy and freedom cannot be taken for granted. Various formats, various sites. Thank you very much for your attention.
네, 악셀 클라우스마이어 이사장님.
Thank you very much for your presentation on the Berlin Wall Foundation. I'd like to invite the second presenter, who is Dr. Manfred Behemann from the Berlin Wall Foundation Archives. He's going to be discussing the collecting to display the artifacts collection.
Hello, I'm glad I finally managed it. I had fatal computer issues. Please apologize my late coming here. I was in stress already. At this time, the computer did not work, this Microsoft. So I am here. I'm very sorry, but I made it in that time. I'm still just a little bit nervous because it was unbelievable with this problem. I'm so glad to be here, and I would like to give you a short introduction. I will start my presentation. Just a second. And first of all, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present some general information on the collections and archives of the Berlin Wall Foundation. I would like to give you a brief introduction into our holdings, and then in the second part, show how we work with the material and with the historical artifacts. Part 1, collecting the heritage. Like all museums collections in general, we are obliged to 4 main goals that define the work of the collection department. That is collecting, preserving, researching, and presenting. While you see here some visual impressions of these different aspects from our work, I will focus on 2 aspects, collecting and presenting, displaying, and try to show how these different goals can be effectively combined. The collections of the Berlin Wall Foundation consist mainly of objects, photographs, documents, media, maps, plans, picture postcards, publications, archival files, and biographical bundles. As historical artifacts, they deal with the history of the Berlin Wall and the time of division, focusing on the refugees from East Germany and including the influence the border had on people's life during the Cold War. The archive of contemporary witnesses, including hundreds of interviews, and the open-air lapidarium as part of the memorial grounds are 2 other very specific as well as important parts of the diverse foundation's archives. The Oral History Archive was set up from the early beginning and made accessible to the public. The Memorial's Lapidarium at Bernauer Straße is the central storage place for original wall remnants from all over Berlin. The collections are constantly expanding, and most of new artifacts are acquired by private donations. The foundation has set up an active collection acquisition policy in the recent years, which is accompanied by special interest purchases for temporary exhibitions and specific research. The same applies to historical photographs that are of great importance to the collection due to the numerous external inquiries. Since 2012, the collections are structured in categories of different types that you see here, of artifacts to make research easier and to secure the preservation standards for the different types of material. The collections preserve around 650 original objects of different types and origins with historical references to the wall and the division. This includes relics of the fortifications, equipment and uniforms of the border troops and the Allies, artifacts related to everyday life, but also to escape stories and to the fall of the wall, as well as objects of contemporary commemorative culture. Furthermore, about the same number of original objects are part of the Marienfelde refugee camp collection and are mainly personal items of refugees from the GDR. The photo archive, where you see here some examples, collects prints, negatives, and slides on all aspects of the Berlin Wall, in particular on the topics of the building history, the border regime, the living with the wall on both sides, escapes and resistance, of course, the fall of the wall, and traces of the border in the cityscape. The photo archive consists mainly of 30,000 historical photographs, from which 25,000 are digitized. The archives shows a wide range of perspectives, including secret pictures from East Berlin and pictures of the border troops. For research reason, you find furthermore an 8,000 data records database for holdings from other archives on the topics I mentioned above. The media collection includes all types of film and video recordings, sound recordings, and audio files, as well as computer applications. It assembles mainly documentation material and is supplemented by fictional works such as television films and movies. The inventory of around 1,300 units is mainly digital available, but includes also film reels, audio cassettes, and videotapes in different forms. A large part of the collections are original documents such as certificates, applications, forms, announcements, letters, records, and brochures, as well as various publications such as newspapers and magazines. The documents and publications collection is only partially digitized and recorded, but contains important documents from East and West. In the last years, a picture postcard collection with currently 1,400 pieces of historical postcard motifs of the Berlin Wall from the early 1960s until the reunification was assembled, showing how the image of the Berlin Wall and the fortifications changed during the times and how it was perceived as a touristic highlight as well. The map collection preserves around 600 maps and plans that are completely digitized. This includes a complete set of topographical maps of the border troops with a barrier system along the sector border and with school wall maps and city maps from the times of division. All of these different kinds of material heritage together form the artifacts collection, and some specific examples are displayed in our permanent exhibitions and on loan in other museums. But for educational and scientific purposes, two other branches I like to emphasize here. The first one is the so-called research archive that results from our own archive research studies in the last years and from the conceptual work on the different historical sites of the foundation. These are primarily excerpts and printed or digital copies from state archives that can be viewed for reference. The other one I already mentioned is the oral history archive, which is as well continuously expanding. This archive continues personal data records with biographical information, text documents, and of course, audio interviews as digital files. It consists of 950 data records, and of the 500 audio interviews, more than 200 are analyzed by scientific methods. The artifacts of the contemporary witnesses that often are donated when the interview takes place are part of the collections as well. All kinds of material and the interviews, along with a reference collection of historical pictures, are stored, linked, and accessible in the central database. For professional documentation standards and to set up online accessibility of the objects, a complete new modern and very important web-based database system was established in 2015. This database system was expanded by us by a special programmed expansion in order to link and incorporate the complete oral history archive. Since then, all of our material and immaterial sources of the history of the Berlin Wall are subsequently administrated in only one central database. Within 5 years, more than 24,000 data records were created. The central database serves also as a management system for the digital images and media files, containing more than 300,000 data files, and these days around 1,300 gigabytes of data. An interface for free online research, also for external users, will be available during this year. So in 2025, also our guests from Korea will have the possibility to take a look into our collections online. Part 2, educational work with the collections, the presenting of our material. The collecting and constant preserving of the original artifacts is a main task of the Foundation. They are widely used for the exhibitions at the authentic sites, for publications and scientific studies. But its most potential and diverse purpose is to incorporate the artifacts in all possible ways into the educational work of the memorial. Let me here present you one way of our work led by this intention: to collect, to display, and hence to educate. Since the digital revolution and online or media-based education have become the dominant way of teaching and learning, our established educational programs with guided tours and workshops need to be expanded by online resources that provide immediate access to historical sources. Starting 3 years ago, the Collections Department joined the Global Open Access Initiative and developed a unique online resource for free use, which I've chosen here as it is also available to all the members of the conference right now. Dealing with the different images of the wall is a multiple starting point for political education and media competence training as well, especially for the younger generation. This requires both types of visual sources: the iconic images and worldwide known pictures, like the jump of Konrad Schumann you see above on the left, as well as unknown and unpublished photo sources, mostly from private donors. These previously unpublished sources can show new or less well-known aspects of the division and serve for more individual learning methods. The wide range of different visual sources are essentially to make the complexity of the division explainable and understandable. Our photo archive needs a large number of different pictures in order to document the diversity and different topics of this unique border. Nowadays, the educational work with historical sources has to deal with unlimited expansion of visual communication on the internet. The problem is no longer finding sources like it was in the 20th century, but how to use the overwhelming offer of digital media even to historical topics. The ability of critical evaluation has become decisive for today's researcher, and that requires basic knowledge of a critical source analysis. Here you see some examples on how the message is changing even if you see the nearly same motif of the Berlin Wall. Artifacts collections, with their extensive historical sources, offer the ideal practical learning environment for these competences. This is the basic approach to our open access initiative, which was combined with a seminar taking place at the Berlin Wall Memorial. The goal of the open access website is to make previously unknown photographs of the Berlin Wall free available for presentation and personal use, regardless of the educational formats and independently from paying a visit to the Bernauer Straße Memorial. The primary target groups are teachers and students in schools, universities, and other educational institutions. Our goal is to turn a part of our collections into an inventory of free usable primary sources available in an uncomplicated but well-documented manner. The project had a long story, which I will not tell here, just some words starting off as a digitization project, later testing the idea of free accessible pictures on conferences, and finally programming an easy-to-use website for research. The results, like the MauAR augmented reality, was also used by Apple's CEO Tim Cook. The historical pictures derive from our private donations and are accessible on the website mauerfotos.de. The images on this website are free for immediate download and usage options by Creative Commons licenses in order to enable the widest possible freedom to work with the material. All of the pictures are entitled and have a description explaining details and historical background information. Of course, the standard data of every museum's artifact, like date, place, photographer, and inventory number, are part of the description as well. Furthermore, the precise location of the images was added with GPS data, along with the relevant keywords for contextual search. In addition to an integrated full-text search, using the criteria of time, place, and keyword, the search for images can be filtered by years, by streets, or by the assigned keywords. 3 different result modes are available for viewing and selection. An image-oriented gallery view, you see here, a tile view with a reduced image section and a short title, and finally, a map overview with the marked locations of the chosen photographs. Anytime the user can access the individual picture entries where the original photo is presented with description and classification. Finally, the pictures can either be downloaded as a pure image file or as a data sheet, including the picture. But the website was not only designed for individual research and usage option, since 2 forms of didactic offers were included from the beginning. The albums are bundles of relevant photographs with short historical explanations on certain topics. They are also serve as introductive glossary. The teaching area provides worksheets and learning materials especially designed for some of the pictures. And finally, I would like to point out that this open access initiative is not a standalone project. It became an integral part of our photo workshop offered by the staff of the memorial. During this workshop, the school groups get historical introductions and they research additional contextual information from the Mauer Photos website in preparation to visit the authentic place. There, they need to determine the location and motive of the historical image as precisely as possible, and then take their own picture of the current state with their mobile phones. When they return, the students finally combine the historical photographs from our collections with their own pictures. The historical motive, the change of the place, and the individual decisions on perspective and frame are discussed together in the group. This final stage is a classical, non-digital presentation of the results, where the students mark the locations and their respective photographs on a border strip made of paper. In the concluding discussion, questions about the authenticity and subjectivity of photo sources, as well as aspects of source analysis, are discussed based on the comparison of the historical and self-made images. Conclusion: the longer the time has passed since the second half of the last century, the more important the role of material relics as bridges to the past will become. Preserving original remnants and collecting historical artifacts of the Berlin Wall are therefore indispensable means to explain its historical context and details, be it for the millions of visitors each year or for our educational programs. The collections document different aspects of the division and show that the Berlin Wall was a border regime with an ever-changing system of fortifications rather than just a simple wall. Using this example, I hope to have shown you that collections, if they are connected by international documentation standards and internet media data references, with historical artifacts that are online researchable and digital available within seconds and for everyone, are the common ground and the treasure houses not only to the classical presentation and to today's ways of learning, but also for future ways of teaching and learning that we today even might not be able to imagine. Thank you very much for your attention.
네, 비만 소장님의
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wichmann, for your presentation. Listening to the presentation, we are able to hear that archive is not something that is fixed, but it is moving, it is developing, and we were able to find those information from the Berlin Wall Foundation presentations. We have finished all the presentations for the first section. We are running a little late. Right now it's 5:13 Korean time. We're going to have a 7-minute break and we're going to resume at 5:20 Korean time. Thank you.